Okay, first of all, how many of you have actually heard of geocaching? How many of you have actually been geocaching yourself, or families who have been geocaching? Oh, that's enough of you, that's done now. What is geocaching? I mean, I think a lot of us have got a picture of geocaching in our heads because we've actually seen things on television about it, or have actually dabbled in it once or twice ourselves. Essentially, geocaching is a high-tech treasure hunt, but you're actually using high-tech equipment like a GPS unit. Now, I'm sure most of you have a fair idea of what GPS is. GPS basically is a satellite-based technology. There's a constellation of satellites going around the world constantly, and generally you can see at least 12 of these, and an electronic device can actually use those signals from the GPS satellites to actually work out precisely where you are and how high you are in the world today. They do that by timing. There's atomic clocks on each of these, and they time exactly how much time the signal gets, do a bit of maths, and exactly where you are. When I say exactly, I think a domestic unit will have an error of between 5 and 10 meters in it when you're practically using it. That comes into it when you're actually geocaching. So it's a real-world outdoor treasure hunting game using GPS-enabled devices. When geocaching started back in 2001, you'd be using something like this. It would be a dedicated GPS unit. You'd have to manually put your coordinates in, and you'd then go out, follow the arrow, as people say, and find the geocache. Over the years, it's become more complicated. If you look at this one actually has an app built into it for geocaching. You can now download all your coordinates directly off the geocaching website and actually have all the data in your device. But to be honest, most people these days actually download apps. There's a dedicated app by geocaching themselves to actually go out there and find geocaches. It'll put things up like, as you can see there, a map. And you can actually look at the map and you can see where the caches are. It'll also give you all the details of what you need to find. So what are you doing when you're geocaching? Well, essentially you're seeking containers called geocaches. They're just little boxes hidden at precisely designated coordinates. You find out what the coordinate is, you go out and find it. Now I've put here, it's totally international. There is actually a cache in absolutely every single country in the world except one. Can anyone guess what that country is? North Korea. North Korea, of course it is. North Korea, they don't like GPS equipment in North Korea, so you're not allowed to take anything like that in. Now this map gives you an idea of the density of geocaches. Now each dot there isn't a geocache, it's a cluster of geocaches. And you can actually see North America, Europe, Australasia, a bit of South Africa there as well. There's quite a lot of geocaches out there. Oops, back one. That gives you a better idea of the density of geocaches. This is obviously Northwest Europe and the British Isles. Britain especially, quite dense. This is looking quite familiar. Again, there's quite a lot here. I won't go into that big circle up there. That's something quite special. You will start seeing patterns on the map. By patterns, I mean you can actually start seeing lines and things like that. That's because people actually place geocaches along footpaths. It's as simple as that. This is our area, and as you can see, still quite a lot of geocaches to see. There's even a geocache actually on the International Space Station. And the question I've been asked is, how do you find the geocache that's on the International Space Station? The answer is very simple. Become a spaceman. How did geocaching start? Well, this is a good question because geocaching has a very definite start. Well, when GPS was first introduced by the American military, they actually introduced something called selective availability. The idea being that the actual domestic version was much more inaccurate than the military version of GPS. Typically, when you bought your GPS unit before the year 2000, it would actually be, I'd say, 100 meters accuracy. Certainly not accurate to find a specific object on the ground. Probably not even good enough to drive and navigate with. But for various reasons, people had actually implemented other methods to get around this, so they decided to turn it off, and they picked a specific day to turn it off, the 2nd of May 2000. And this is a graph of it actually being turned off. Accuracy of 100 meters, accuracy of 2 meters, suddenly, instantly. The next day, there was a discussion on Usenet forums. Remember those? What we used to discuss things on before Twitter and things like that came along. There was a discussion on Usenet forums about what we could do with this newly found accuracy. And on May the 3rd, just the day after it, a guy called David Ulmer placed a black bucket in the woods and said, look, here are the coordinates. I've put some stuff in there. Why don't you go out and find it? And that's what happened. Over the next few weeks, a lot of people actually went out to find this little black bucket. Also, over the next few weeks, other people got the same idea and started doing this. And there's Dave there. There's actually now a plaque where the very first geocache was placed. Now, it was still quite a diverse thing. You had to go to the various sources to find the coordinates. This guy here called Jeremy Irish, he was working for a certain software company in Seattle, and he came to the idea, he went out and found one of these caches and thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to centralize this and have one website where we can actually go and find all the caches? And that's what he did. He formed a company called Groundspeak and created this website. What is a geocache? I'll try to get as briefly as this as possible. The only two things you really need is some sort of container and a logbook. Very often people have a pencil in there. There very often be swap items in there because people want these to be family friendly. So there'll be swap items so the kids can actually enjoy doing it as well. Or what are we going to find in this cache? Oh, we'll swap this for that sort of thing. There's a picture of a typical, and there's the Tupperware that I mentioned in the title. That's one of the things we've got common in the two talks today, Tupperware. You'll find a swap item, that's the Rubik's Cube. We've got a pen. There's the logbook in there. There's a couple of other swap items. There's also information on the box there as well, just to explain what it is in case somebody comes across it by accident. It's not all Tupperware though. As you can see here, you can be quite ingenious about your containers. You've got the standard size one there. You've got a log that's disguised. So you're going to have to be a bit more ingenious in finding these sometimes. I was going to bring one of these in. There's actually a cone there, a hollow cone. And your cache is in there. It's got the logbook in there. 35mm film canisters. They used to be very popular. But for some reason, not so popular anymore. They get very small. That's smaller than a thimble. So the sort of thing you're looking for is quite diverse. So what do you look for? Well, you're not allowed to bury these things, so very often you're looking for a particular pattern. So you're looking for very often a pile of stones or a pile of wood like that. So your average cache is hidden just like that. Very often most people would ignore it, but suddenly your senses become aware and you know what these things look like. However, not all of them are like that. Some people get a bit more adventurous, and for example, that one's up a tree. Not my taste, but there we go. Here's another example of one. This person had found a hole in a wall. They've put a little tub in the wall, and as you can see, it opens up like that. You get the log out of it, no problem. I can guarantee that almost everybody in this room has actually walked past this, possibly even today. That's just the back out there. So next time you go there, have a look for it. It's just hidden there. That is a geocache. Now, when you're actually there trying to find something, remember I mentioned there was that difficulty. Once you're within 10 meters, you actually have to use your senses to look for things. And sometimes it can be quite difficult because people actually hide them quite intriguingly. And it's sometimes quite daunting when you're actually looking and you're not finding. And then suddenly you just spot that little telltale pile of wood just over there. And that rewarding feeling. Yes, found it. I can sign the log. Very quickly, different categories. You've got the large, regular, small, and then there's the micro. And the micro can be anything from about that size to that size. I'll just mention these. Who hides these things? Well, anybody can hide a geocache. Tends to be the geocaching community hide them for themselves, sort of thing. There are some basic regulations, though, that are enforced. First of all, you can't bury a cache. In other words, you don't damage the environment that you're hiding your cache in. You can't place it where it would be a security risk. How many of you actually heard on the news that somebody had actually hidden something, been spotted putting a container under a chair or something, and the police were called out because something suspicious had been noticed? This one's an interesting one. Not within 168 meters of another cache. That's 0.1 of a mile in American speak. In other words, you don't want the density of caches to be too high. One, because you may find the wrong cache. And secondly, it would just make it nonsense if there's a cache every 5 meters. And finally, they also have no commercial use. You can't place it to promote something. And finally, there are a lot more of these regulations, but these are the main ones. Some of them may need additional written permission. Once you submit a cache, once you've placed a cache, you submit it, you fill a web form, describe it, describe where it is. It's then submitted for review, and a volunteer will actually look at that and see if actually it conforms to those regulations. Once it's actually been approved, it's published and it appears on the web, and it gets its own web page like that. Once it's published, people can see it, and one of the things that people love to do is getting the first to find kudos. So once that's up, guaranteed there are probably 3 or 4 people out there trying to find it within 20 minutes. I'll just very quickly go through these. Most people know about geocaches in that you go out and find the top web, but there are different types of geocaches. First of all, there's a regular cache. This is actually hidden at the published coordinates. You go to the website, you see the coordinates, it's going to be there. Now, it might be a difficult find that you have to climb a tree or something for that, but the coordinates are correct for where that is going to be. And that's by far the most prevalent type of cache that you'll find out there. Next is the multi-cache. This basically means that you go somewhere, but the actual cache itself isn't actually at that location. They vary slightly, but typically maybe you actually have to arrive somewhere, say at the front of a church, there's a notice board, and they say, right, fill in the blanks with the 3rd number, the 5th number, and the 7th number of the phone number. Then you can actually then fill the blanks, you get a coordinate, find the actual cache. Some of these can have many levels and many layers as well. Thirdly, there's what's called the mystery or puzzle cache, and this is basically the catch-all for anything that doesn't come under the usual ones. And I'm going to go into one of these before I finish, that I've created myself. That's actually a difficulty 5, the hardest you can get, just to add a bit of technical to this talk. But they can vary. They can have a field puzzle, a puzzle you have to solve whilst you're actually out there, out and about, or you can actually have a difficult puzzle that you can actually solve at home. I've even seen jigsaw puzzles where the coordinates are in the jigsaw. They're actually listed as these. It actually often leads to innovative and new types of caches. Very briefly, Earth Cache doesn't have a container at it. It's an educational experience. You answer some questions about a location that you've been that has some interesting geology. You learn about the geology, you go there, you prove you've been there by answering the questions. Here's probably the most famous Earth Cache in the United Kingdom. It's the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. It was exactly the same with that. You had to measure something. You had to answer another question to prove that you'd actually been there. You found the cache. Letterbox Hybrid. Everybody heard of letterboxing? No? Letterboxing actually started over 100 years ago in roughly this area. And the idea of a letterbox is basically you get a description of roughly where to go, rather than the actual cache itself, the coordinates. So the coordinates will say, get there, then maybe you'll be given a description, right, 50 paces this way, turn right at the post, and you eventually get there. And most of these are combined with letterboxing as well. If you know about letterboxing, there'll be a stamp in there that you stamp your own logbook as well for the letterbox. Now, where I go is quite an interesting one because these are quite rare and these are more technical. They basically played on a mobile device, originally designed to be a Pocket PC, a Microsoft Pocket PC. The original design, the original system only works on a Pocket PC, the official version. However, because they've become quite enjoyable and people have enjoyed creating these, they're now available for Android and iPhone as well. But they're third-party products now. You have an IDE, you design a game which is based on coordinates. It can be as complicated as you like or as simple as you like. The third-party players are actually quite reliable these days, and the new development environment that's also third-party is also very good to use. The original one was quite difficult. The nearest one of these, believe it or not, is just across the road there in Heartlands. This takes the form of a game where you actually interact with virtual characters. You go around from place to place. You have to take virtual objects from one character to another. And it takes probably about an hour to play. And it's obviously aimed at children because it's based on the game of the film Frozen. There's also the social element. You've got event caches. That's just people getting together. You get together in a pub, perhaps have a chat about geocaching or anything else. There's actually a lot more people there than actually here, because I just took a picture from one point of view. They also might take you to an exotic destination. This event that I went to is actually on Skellig Michael, which is off the southwest coast of Ireland. Some of you may actually notice this staircase here is actually featured in the very last few scenes of Star Wars as well. That, believe it or not, is going to appear in the next film. I've actually spotted it in the trailer. It's a very unusual looking rock, and you'll see some training going on right next to it. Camping is also quite a big thing. People get together. Don't worry about the hats. There was a theme to this get together. It was the Wild Wild West. So as well as an event, we got a mega event. The only difference there is much bigger. You've got to have proved that there have been at least 500 people who've come there. This is a mega event in Swansea. And as you can see, there's a lot of people there. You've got trade stands along the side. People can sit down in the middle there. And it's usually lasts a whole day. A Giga Event, never had one of these in the UK yet. 5,000 people attend. There've been a few there's been at least one I can think of in Europe. I think there've been a couple now. And there've been a few in America as well. There's the American one. That's outside the geocaching headquarters, where they're actually based. And there's finally the CETO, or Cash In, Trash Out. It's purely, basically, people getting together and helping the environment, spending maybe an hour picking rubbish and generally clearing the area. We actually got 12 bags out of this. This is actually in the west of Ireland, and geocaching also takes you to interesting places as well. Just over the hill there, there's a rather interesting looking house. There is actually a geocache quite close to that as well. I'll skip these, we're running out of time. These you can't place anymore, but they're still out there. One other thing that you got in geocaching as well is the trackable items. Geocaching realized quite quickly that people like to actually see where the items are going in these caches. So what they created was a physical item that you can actually connect to something like one of your own items in the form of a dog tag with a serial number on it. You can then log that on the website, and you can then watch that traveling across the world using maps like this. This is one of my travel bags. I released it up in Kent when I was living there. It travelled around the UK for a bit there, then bounced down here for a while, Portugal, Spain, and then spent a bit of time up that way. They don't last forever, you know, people lose them, whatever, so I think that went missing about 6 years ago. But it's fun watching these things go. Each of those actually has their own page, just like a cache does as well. As you can see here, this is one of mine, and it's got the dog tag there, which would have its serial number there. Sometimes people give them goals as well. So I actually had one that wanted to see penguins in the wild. That one actually did get to see a penguin in the wild. There are also geocoins as well. These are a special type of travel bug. This is one I designed for South Wales community. Again, they're very much like travel bugs, but they travel in their own right, and they would have a serial number in the same way as well. There's another one I designed, and another one. There's actually two different ones there. This is my signature item as well, that I actually sell and use as a forum as well. Okay, this is nearly there now. This is the last bit. I told you about mystery caches. I've created a puzzle cache. I've created quite a few puzzle caches, but I've created a puzzle cache which is hidden not a million miles away from here, which actually basically requires a bit of solving before you go out and find it. You have to do a bit of work. This one actually needs quite a bit of technical skill. It needs a bit of computer knowledge as well, and needs to understand how images work, and you need to be able to think outside the box. This is the point I want the video cut, because this is a live cache, and people will use this video to actually find the cache, and it will become, from a difficulty 5, the hardest time, to probably difficulty 2. There's just a video out there. I can go into the hide mechanism, how I actually created that, but there really is no time. So I'll leave it there, and thanks for listening to that. Any questions? Yeah? Yes. Yeah. I had a whole section on this, but I had to cut it out. When you actually go to a cache, you can log it as a find, did not find, needs maintenance, needs archiving. Basically, you tell the cache owner what state the cache is in. It's very good for maintenance because you're expected to maintain your cache. If you don't maintain your cache, who else is going to do it? So if a cache says needs maintenance, you're really expected to go out there, make sure that everything's okay. Generally, the box might be leaking or something like that. If it's did not find, if you have 2 or 3 did not finds in a row, definitely there's something wrong there. You go out and find it and try to replace it, or get rid of it if it's a problem. Because some areas you suddenly realize are a problem, and people nick them. Any other questions?
The travel box, you designed them yourself?
The geocoins, the three geocoins you saw there, are actually all 3 that I've designed myself, but generally people will go out and buy them. There are shops that create them specially for the purpose. Some of them have a theme, some of them are just very nice to look at, that sort of thing.
What kind of interest have you had in
The penguin, 1,200 sold. The puffin, 300-400 sold. Yeah, they are quite popular.
So you make them yourself?
I use an American company called... I've actually made a slate version myself. I've got a slate geocoin from Welsh Slate. However, most of the time I use oak coins they're called, but there are different companies that actually make them. The metal ones, yeah. They're actually minted in China, but the company will go through all the process with you. They'll do all the artwork, make sure the artwork conforms to what can actually be done on the coin, and you go through the whole process like that. Again, I could do a whole talk on geocoins because it is quite an involved process, and there's many different types of them as well. But how many have I found? 2,468. So today. Some people around, especially in Cornwall, have much, much higher fines. We're talking, there's one guy who's celebrating his 10,000th fine the other day. How many do I own? It's more difficult to answer because the count on the website actually includes all the ones you've archived as well. And as you know, you move from place to place perhaps. You don't want to keep ones in an area that you're not going to be in anymore. So I'd say I've got about 100 going at the moment. Okay, thanks.